The number stared back at me from my phone screen. 3,500. I blinked. I'd been staring at code for 48 hours straight, my eyes dry and gritty, but I knew what I was seeing. 0.3, 0.5, 0.0, 0.0. That was my paycheck. That was what they decided I was worth. I was on my third cup of instant coffee, and it was sitting in my stomach like battery acid. The server had finally stabilized about an hour ago. The bug that had crippled our entire system for 3 days, quashed by my own hand. I'd done it alone. The rest of the team had packed up and left around 9, then 10, then 11 WY midnight. It was just me and the hum of the machines. George Mitchell, our director, had stopped by my desk around 7. He put his hand on my shoulder, that heavy palm weighing down like he was blessing me. "Nicholas, we're counting on you," he'd said. "This bug is a blocker. The product launch is riding on this." I just nodded. I didn't have the energy to say anything. I was too deep in the code, following the threads of logic that had tangled into a knot no one else could untie. I'd been doing this for 3 years at this company, coming in early, staying late, fixing problems other people created. And now, at 3 in the morning, with no one else around to see, I'd finally killed it. I should have felt good, victorious. Instead, I just felt hollowed. I was an assembly line worker who just built a whole factory by himself, and no one was around to notice, and no one would remember tomorrow. Now my phone was telling me exactly what they remembered. $3,500. I'm 38 years old. I've been in software engineering for over a decade. I've written code that processes millions of transactions a day. I just completed a project that brought in a government contract worth 7 figures, and this is what they paid me? This is what a month of my life, the headaches, the coffee, the exhaustion, the days I didn't see my apartment in daylight, was worth to them? I closed the banking app and opened the company portal. I was in the system, looking for my latest review. I already knew what I'd find. A week ago, Human Resources had called me in. "Nicholas, your performance rating came back at D," Elaine from HR had said, her voice flat and official. "Below expectations. The primary concerns are engagement and collaboration." I'd sat there, listening to her read from a script. Engagement. I came in earlier than anyone. I left later than anyone. I'd been so engaged I'd forgotten what silence sounded like. Collaboration. I'd been fixing the mistakes of the new hires. I'd turned George Mitchell's pet project into something functional. I'd personally trained Audrey Wilson, the junior developer who'd been lost her first week, and now she was one of our strongest coders. "Can I see the specifics?" I'd asked. "It's not that kind of review," she'd said. "It's the determination of the leadership team." The leadership team, meaning George. I'd known then something was coming. I just hadn't known it would be this. I put my phone down on the desk and looked at my computer. There was still a lot of work to do on the next project. The schedule was aggressive. George was already talking about needing to see prototypes by the end of the week. The new guy, the one who'd been here a month, Vivian was his name, if you could believe it, a guy named Vivian. He was the one George was always checking in on, smiling at, pats on the back. His code was terrible. I'd had to rewrite 3 of his modules already, but he was always the first to get the updates, the deadlines, the opportunities. He'd left around 6 tonight. Before he'd gone, he'd stopped at my desk. "You're still here, man," he'd said, leaning in. "You gotta get a life." He was wearing a jacket that probably cost more than my rent. He smelled like expensive cologne. "Hey, payday today, right?" My first real check that I'm excited to see what the number looks like. Excited. He was excited. I hadn't answered. I just nodded and turned back to my code. Now I was staring at his jacket, still draped over his chair like a flag, his monitor still on. The screensaver was some scrolling text, a message he'd left for himself. "Remember to call Eve." Eve. That was his fiancée, the one he was always talking about. "She's going to love this," he'd say, showing me pictures of the ring he'd bought her. "She's going to be so impressed." The ring, the jacket, the codes he couldn't write. I was still looking at his monitor when the screen changed. A text message came through. He'd synced his phone to the computer and left it open. "Babe, the preview window showed the message. Just checked my bank. 28,000. Let's go to that place you wanted for dinner. I'm buying you that bag." $28,000. I sat there for a long moment, not moving. The coffee in my stomach was cold now, curdled. The number hung in the air between his monitor and mine like a ghost. 3,500. 28,000. 8 times what I'd made. 0.8 times. And I'd been here for 3 years. I'd built systems I'd trained as replacements. I'd held this company together when the code broke, when the clients panicked, when George Mitchell had to stand in front of the board and explain why the launch was delayed, but really it was Nicholas who would spend the weekend fixing it. And Vivian had been here a month. A month of showing up at 10, leaving at 5, having meetings about meetings. A month of rewriting my code badly, of breaking what I'd built, of George telling everyone what a great asset he was to the team. I closed the banking app. I closed the HR portal. I opened a blank document. 2 minutes later, I had a resignation letter. 3 sentences. "To the leadership of this company, I hereby resign my position effective immediately. Sincerely, Nicholas Hayes." I printed it. The paper was hot from the office laser printer, the ink still smudgy. I folded it and put it in my pocket. Then I did something that surprised even me. I went back to my computer and started backing up the files I'd created over the last 3 years. Project specifications, code libraries, documentation. All of it. I'd been a fool not to do this before, a fool to trust that a company that paid me 8 times less than the new guy actually valued my work. I wasn't stealing. They were my files that I'd written every line, but I knew what they'd say if they found out. So I was careful. I copied everything to a portable drive I'd had in my bag, an old USB stick I'd used for nothing important. Now it contained every piece of work I'd ever done for this company. When I was done, I packed my bag, my coffee mug, the small cactus I'd kept on my desk, the one thing that had green life in this gray office. I pocketed my phone. I pocketed the resignation letter. I stood up. The office was empty. The hum of the servers was still there, the only witness to my work. I walked to George's office. The door was closed, as usual. He'd left hours ago, of course. He was always the first out, the first to delegate, the first to take credit, and the first to disappear when things went wrong. I'd seen him do it 100 times, I'd never done a thing about it. The door was locked. I slid the resignation letter under it. It made a soft scraping sound as it disappeared into the dark. I took my badge off. The blue plastic was warm in my hand, the photo from 3 years ago staring up at me. I'd been hopeful then. I'd thought this was the start of something. I put it on the fire extinguisher hook outside the door. It looked like a lonely artifact, like something from a museum exhibit called How I Used to Be. I walked toward the elevator. I didn't look back. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, watching the numbers descend, feeling the building drop away beneath me. When I stepped out into the street, the sun was just beginning to lighten the sky. A pale gray dawn, the kind that said, "You worked all night, and now it's morning and the world is still here." I went home. I went to bed. I didn't set an alarm. I woke at noon. For the first time, and I didn't know how long, there were no messages. No pings. No urgent emails. The silence was a physical thing, a pressure against my ears. I made coffee. Real coffee, not the instant sludge from the office. I sat on my balcony and watched the city breathe beneath me. Then my phone rang. Nicholas? It was Audrey, the junior developer. I'd trained her. She was good. She was going to be better than good. But she was still there, still in that building, still answering to George. "Hey," I said. My voice was rough. "Are you okay? I got in this morning, and people are saying you resigned. Is that true?" "Yeah, it's true." "Nicholas, what happened?" I told her. Not all of it. Not the 3,500, not the 28,000, not the look on George's face when he'd patted my shoulder, but enough. "The pay," I said. "The way they treat people. I couldn't keep doing it." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I understand. I'm sorry. You were the only reason I learned anything here. You were the only one who actually helped me." "Your turn will come," I said. "You'll figure out what you need to do." She laughed, but it was a sad laugh. "I don't think I'm as brave as you." "Don't be brave," I said. "Be smart." I hung up. The sun was bright. My coffee was hot. I was free of the gray walls of the office, the hum of the servers, the weight of George's hand on my shoulder. But I wasn't free of the numbers. 3,500 and 28,000. They were still in my head, circling like sharks. An hour later, Audrey called back. "Nicholas, you need to know something," she said. Her voice was tight. "George is in a meeting with HR right now. He's talking about filing a complaint against you. He says you abandoned your post. He says he's going to sue for breach of contract." "He can try," I said. "My contract doesn't require more than 2 weeks' notice. And I resigned. There's no breach." "He's also talking to legal," Audrey said. "He's claiming you took proprietary data." I looked at the USB stick in my bag. I hadn't taken anything proprietary. I'd taken my own work. But I knew George. He'd find a way to make it sound like something else. "If he calls, tell him I'm happy to explain my side of things," I said, with a lawyer present. "Okay," she said. "Be careful." "I will." I hung up and sat down at my laptop. I started writing down everything I'd done in the last 3 years, every project, every fix, every time I'd saved the company's ass. I started to see patterns I hadn't noticed before. The government contract I'd helped win, the one that had brought in almost $2 million. My name was on the technical documentation, but not on the proposal. George's name was on the proposal. The training program I designed, 6 months of curriculum, the building of new talent. They'd called it the George Mitchell Mentorship Initiative. The system I'd rebuilt from the ground up, it was now called George's Vision. I'd been invisible. I'd been erased from the history of my own work. That's when I knew I couldn't just leave. I had to show them what they'd lost. I had to make them feel it. I opened my email. I started writing. Not to George, not to HR. I wrote to the company's board, the one that had never met me, the one that only saw quarterly reports and product launches. "I am writing to document the circumstances of my departure from the company." I began. "I've spent the last 3 years serving as the primary technical architect for the majority of the company's recent project wins. I am attaching documentation of the work I performed, including the government contract, the training program, and the system rebuild. I wish to bring to the board's attention several matters of concern." It was a draft. It was a bomb, and I was going to drop it, but not yet. I needed to wait. I needed them to feel the first ripple before I created the wave. The phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Nicholas Hayes?" "Yes." "This is Margot Stevens. I'm with the board of directors." I sat up straighter. The board. In 3 years, the board had never contacted me. "I'm calling because we received your email," she said. "And I have to tell you, the board is concerned. We need to talk to you. We need to understand what happened." "Then you need to talk to George Mitchell," I said. And you need to ask him why he paid a new hire 8 times what he paid me. 8 times. She heard the number land. Nicholas, I'm not going to pretend I know what's been happening at the ground level, she said. But I know something is wrong. I've seen the numbers, and they don't add up. I can help you add them up, I said, but only if you want the truth. Come in tomorrow, she said. 9 o'clock. Boardroom C. It's time we had a conversation. I hung up. My heart was pounding. Tomorrow morning, they were going to listen. The next day, I got dressed in a suit I'd barely worn in years, and I walked into the building I'd left just days ago as a $3,500 man. The security guard at the front desk looked at my badge, the one I'd left on the fire extinguisher, and waved me through. Glad you're back, he said. He didn't know. The elevator took me up to the 20th floor. I walked through the halls where I'd spent so many hours, past the coffee station where I'd poured so many cups, past the glass walls of conference rooms where I'd watched dreams get approved and projects get killed. The doors to boardroom C were closed. I knocked. Come in. George was there. He was sitting at the table, his face red, his hands folded in front of him. Next to him was a man in a suit I didn't recognize. A lawyer, probably. Margot Stevens sat at the head of the table. She was a woman in her 60s, with sharp gray eyes and a style that said she'd seen it all. Nicholas, she said, thank you for coming. Please sit down. I sat, across from George. We have some concerns, Margot said. Your email was direct, and George here has been adamant that you left without cause, and that any attempt to impugn his leadership is defamatory. Defamatory, I repeated. The word tasted like ash. Let me be clear, I said. I'm not here to attack George personally. I'm here to present facts. Here are the facts. I pulled out copies of the spreadsheets I'd prepared, every project I'd worked on, the hours I'd logged, the impact I'd had on revenue, and next to it, the pay I'd received. The gap between what I'd contributed and what I'd gotten. 3 years ago, when I started, I was told I'd be on a fast track to management, I said. I've been here longer than anyone in my department except George. I've trained every new hire. I've fixed every bug. I've written code that makes this company millions, and I've been paid like a junior assistant. George's face was practically glowing. Nicholas, this is a serious allegation. You're being compensated fairly by the company's standard structure. Standard structure, I said. Vivian Clark, he's been here a month. He's not trained anyone. He hasn't fixed a single bug. He's broken 3 different builds since he started. And he's making $28,000 a month. The room went silent. What are you talking about? Margot asked. I'm talking about the spreadsheets, I said. I have the data. I pulled out the USB drive I'd prepared, the copied files, the email from Vivian's phone I'd seen, the text message from his fiancée. I hadn't taken it. I'd just seen it. I'd remembered it. Vivian's salary is public information, I said. I know what he's making, and I know that the company's policy states that compensation is tied to performance and experience. I'm not sure what performance he's being tied to, but it's not performance. George stood up. This is ridiculous. You're making personal attacks. George, sit down. Margot's voice was hard. She turned to me. You're saying there's an $18,000 discrepancy between what you're making and what a new hire is making? Monthly? I'm saying that the person who wrote the code that's going to make the company millions is being paid less than the person who's been here 30 days, I said. And that the person who's been here 30 days has a relative on the board. Silence. Complete silence. I'm not saying anything that isn't documented, I said. I have the emails, that I have the records. I have the proof that every dollar I asked for was denied while every dollar Vivian asked for was approved. I put the USB drive on the table. This contains the documentation. If you want the truth, it's right there. I stood up. I'm not coming back. I'm not going to be treated like I'm worth less than someone else's lackey. But I wanted you all to know the facts before the board made any decisions about the future of this department. I walked out. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Behind me, I heard George's voice, arguing, demanding, and Margot Stevens saying, George, I need you to be quiet for a moment. I need to think. She was thinking. She was seeing the numbers. She was seeing the truth. And I knew it was only a matter of time before everyone else saw it too. That night, I was sitting on my balcony, looking at the sky. The stars were out. They were the same stars I'd been looking at for weeks, months, years. They looked back at me from behind smog and neon for so long I'd forgotten they were still there. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Nicholas, this is Margot Stevens. I've reviewed the documents. I'd like to talk to you tomorrow. We have a lot to discuss. I put the phone down. I looked at the stars again. I was walking away from a company that had tried to break me. I was walking into something new. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was better than what I'd left. Tomorrow, I decide what to do with the rest of my life. Tonight, I just rest. I closed my eyes. And I finally slept. I slept for 10 hours. When I woke, the sun was already high and my phone was full of notifications. Most of them were from Audrey. George is losing it. He's been in meetings all morning. The board is asking questions. Vivian is crying in the break room. I didn't reply. I made coffee, sat on my balcony, and watched the city move beneath me. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was breathing. Then my phone rang. The name on the screen. George Mitchell. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to talk to him, but he called again, and again, 4 times in 10 minutes. Then a text message came through. Nicholas, we need to talk. It's urgent. The project, the big one, the client called. They're asking for you specifically. We need you to come back. We'll work out whatever you want. Call me. The big one, the renewable energy contract worth $5 million. I'd written the technical proposal. I'd done the preliminary architecture. I'd met the client, Robert Collins, the VP of operations at Green Core Energy. He'd been impressed. He told me, "You're the only one here who actually understands what we need." I smiled. Not a happy smile, a cold one. They couldn't do it without me. Of course they couldn't. But they'd been willing to let me go for $3,500 a month, like I was disposable. I didn't call him back. 2 hours later, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. George Mitchell was standing there, sweating in his expensive suit, his tie loosened, his face red. He'd driven across town to find me. He'd probably gotten my address from HR. I opened the door. "Nicholas, thank God." He tried to push past me into the apartment. I blocked the doorway. "What do you want, George?" "We have a crisis. The client, Robert Collins, he called and said the presentation is in 3 days and he won't accept anyone else from our team. He wants you, specifically you. If you're not there, the deal is dead. $0.5 million. Nicholas, we're talking about $5 million. I leaned against the doorframe. "And what does that have to do with me?" "I resigned. I'm no longer your employee. You can come back. We'll make it work. I'll talk to HR. I'll get your pay adjusted." "Adjusted to what?" He hesitated. "We can do 4,500, maybe 5,000. 5,000. He was offering me a raise of $1,500 a month after I'd made the company millions, after he'd paid his new hire 8 times what I'd made. I laughed. I actually laughed. "George, do you hear yourself? You come to my door, begging me to save a deal you can't close without me, and you offer me $5,000? Vivian Clark makes $28,000. Tell me why I'm worth less than a guy who can't write a single function without breaking the build." George's face went pale. That's not fair. Vivian has a different compensation structure." "Because his uncle is on the board?" "I know, George. I've seen the org chart. I've been here long enough to know how things work." I stepped back and started to close the door. Wait, Nicholas, please. What do you want? Name your price." I stopped. I looked at him, this man who'd patted me on the shoulder while I worked through the night, who'd taken credit for my code, who'd sat in meetings and talked about team effort while I did everything. "I want you to admit it," I said. "I want you to tell me, out loud, that you've been taking credit for my work, that you've been paying me less because you thought I wouldn't fight back. That you knew Vivian was a useless hire, but you kept him because his uncle gives you access to the board." He didn't say anything. He just stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Admit it, George." I can't do that, Nicholas. You're asking me to. I'm asking you to tell the truth. That's all." The door began to close. "Nicholas," a voice from the hallway. I turned. Vivian Hayes was walking toward us. Her heels clicked on the linoleum. She was wearing a designer dress, her hair perfectly blown out, her eyes red from crying. "Vivian?" George looked like he'd seen a ghost. She ignored him. She came up to my door and stood there, hands on her hips. "You think you're so clever," she said. "You think just because you wrote a few lines of code, you're irreplaceable, you're nothing to ear grunt. I've already been talking to other companies and you know what? They don't want you. They want people like me, people who can sell, who can network, who can actually bring in business. All you do is sit in a corner and type." She was trying to hurt me. I could see it in her eyes, the fear. She'd heard the board was investigating. She'd heard George was in trouble. And she knew that if I came back, she'd be exposed. I looked at her. "Vivian, how's the bug fix going? The one from yesterday? Did you figure out why your code crashed the staging server?" Her face flushed. "That was a minor issue." "It was a major issue," I said. "It was your code, Vivian. Every time you touch something, it breaks, and you're paid 8 times what I am. Tell me, how does that feel? To know you're only here because your uncle pulled strings. To know that every dollar you make is a dollar someone else earned." Her lower lip trembled. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," I said. "I've seen your pull request and I've seen your commits that I know how long it takes you to do the simplest task. And I know that George here has been covering for you because he didn't want to look bad for hiring you." Vivian turned to George. "Are you going to let him talk to me like that?" George was frozen. He couldn't look at either of us. He'd spent so long playing both sides, keeping Vivian happy with his promises, keeping me working with his threats, and now he couldn't hold the balance anymore. "I think you need to leave," I said. "Both of you." "This isn't over, Nicholas," Vivian spat. "I have contacts. I have connections. I can make your life very difficult." "Good luck with that," I said. "I have documentation, that I have emails, that I have everything you've ever done. I have the audit trails showing you never submitted a line of code that worked without someone else fixing it, and I have the board's phone number. You think they're going to protect you?" She went white. She looked at George, who was still silent. "George," she said, her voice cracking. "Vivian, I think we should go," he finally said. "Go? We're not going anywhere. You said you'd take care of this. You said." I said I talked to him. I'm talking to him, and he's not listening. "Then make him listen. You're the director. You." "I'm the director who's about to be fired if this deal falls through." George shouted. His voice echoed in the hallway. "Do you understand that? The board is breathing down my neck." They've seen the pay discrepancies, they've seen the reports. If we don't get this deal, we're all out. I watched him lose control. It was the first time I'd ever seen George Mitchell scared. Really scared. Then maybe, I said quietly, you should have thought about that before you treated me like I was worth nothing. I closed the door. I locked it. I leaned against the wall and let out a long breath. My heart was pounding. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd exposed them. And now I had to decide what came next. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Not George this time. The caller ID said, Robert Collins. I picked up. Nicholas Hayes? Yes. This is Robert Collins from Green Core Energy. I hope I'm not intruding. No intrusion at all, Mr. Collins. I know George Mitchell contacted you. He did. He told me you'd resigned. He told me you'd refused to come back. Robert's voice was calm, measured. But I also heard something else. I heard why you resigned. I waited. I heard about the pay discrepancy, he said. I heard about the new hire that I heard about a lot of things, Nicholas. And I have to be honest with you. If this is the kind of company that treats its top talent like that, I'm not sure I want to do business with them. I felt something shift in my chest. Hope, maybe. Or relief. So, what happens now? I asked. Now, we talked. I'm not interested in working with your former employer if they don't have you. You are the only one who understood the technical requirements. You are the only one who made sense during the proposal meetings, and I don't trust anyone else. George Mitchell will tell you, he can handle it. He's wrong, Robert said flatly. I've seen their other proposals and I've seen the code they've submitted. It's amateur. It's the kind of work I'd expect from interns. And George Mitchell couldn't explain a single technical detail to me without referring to notes he'd written. So, he'd noticed. He'd been watching. He knew. I'm not going back, I said. Even if they double my pay, I'm not going back. I wouldn't expect you to, Robert said. But I need a solution. This project is important to us. We have deadlines. We have investors. We have a board to answer to. And we need someone who can actually deliver. I took a breath. An idea was forming. Mr. Collins, what if I didn't work for them at all? What if I worked directly with you, as an independent consultant? There was a pause on the line. What exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that I take over the technical architecture of this project. I'll do it as a vendor, not employed. I'll own the code. I'll own the deliverables, and I'll answer to you. Not to George Mitchell. Not to anyone else. And the cost. I did a quick calculation in my head. $0.5 million project. Standard consulting rates, I'd looked this up, were usually around 10 to 15% of project value for the core technical work. But I wasn't asking for that much, that I was building something new, that I was taking a risk. $250,000, I said, plus performance incentives if the project hits its targets. $250,000. That was the same as 7 years of my old salary, but it was a reasonable ask. It was less than what they'd lose if the project failed. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a warm laugh, the kind that said he was actually enjoying this. You're either the smartest person I've met, or the most reckless, he said. Both, I said. And I'm also the only one who can make this project work. Let me think about it, he said. Give me 24 hours. Take your time, I said. I'll be here. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I'd just asked for $250,000. I just put everything on the line. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard George's voice from earlier. You're nothing. You're a grunt. Maybe I was a grunt, but I was a grunt with a plan. I went back to my laptop and started writing. A business plan. A technical roadmap. I needed to be ready if Robert said yes. And if he said no, well, I'd find another way. I always did. The next day, I didn't hear from Robert Collins. I heard from George Mitchell again. He called me 5 times. I let them ring. But at noon, I got a text from Audrey. Nicholas, I'm coming over. I need to talk to you. She showed up an hour later, a small USB drive in her hand. Her eyes were bright with anger and determination. George is going to try to get you fired retroactively, she said. He's drafting a termination letter that says you were terminated for cause. He wants to make it look like you were the problem. I stared at her. He can do that. He's trying, but I'm not going to let him. She held up the USB drive. I copied all the emails. Every time he took credit for your work. Every time he dismissed your suggestions. Every time he approved raises for Vivian that he denied for you. It's all here. I took the drive. I was overwhelmed. I'd trained Audrey. I'd helped her grow. And now she was giving me the ammunition to blow George's career up. This is evidence, I said. This is enough to destroy him. Good, she said. He deserves it. He deserves everything that's coming to him. I put the drive in my pocket. Thank you, Audrey. I mean it. She smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. You taught me how to stand up for myself. I'm just paying it back. She left. I sat there holding the USB drive, feeling the weight of it. All those hours I'd spent, the coffee, the stress, the nights I'd come home exhausted and alone, they'd all led to this moment. This moment when I had the power to make things right. But I couldn't just use the drive. I had to be smart. I had to wait for the right time. If Robert Collins said yes to my proposal, I'd have even more leverage. And if he said no, I checked my phone. No message from Robert yet. I decided to call him, not to rush him, just to let him know I was still here. His assistant answered. Mr. Collins is in a meeting. Can I take a message? Tell him Nicholas Hayes called. No rush. Just letting him know I'm available. I hung up. I went back to my laptop. The silence in my apartment was loud, but it was a good kind of loud. It was the sound of new possibilities. 2 hours later, Robert Collins called back. Nicholas, I've made a decision. My heart stopped. I'm saying yes, he said. 250,000 plus performance incentives that you'll be our lead technical consultant. You'll work directly with my team. And if you deliver, there's more work waiting. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Thank you, Mr. Collins. You won't regret this. I don't think I will, he said. Send me a contract proposal. We'll get started next week. I hung up. I looked around my apartment. The bare walls, the second-hand furniture, the life I'd been living. That life was over now. I opened a new document and started writing the contract. $250,000. A new beginning. But first, I had one more call to make. I dialed George Mitchell's number. He answered on the first ring. Nicholas, thank God you called. We need to. George, I said, cutting him off. I wanted to tell you personally, I'm not coming back, and I'm going to be working with Robert Collins directly. He signed on with me as an independent consultant. The project you thought you were going to get, it's mine now, and you're not part of it. Silence. Complete silence. I could hear him breathing, fast and shallow. You can't do that, he finally said. That's our contract. It's not your contract yet, I said, and it never will be, because I'm the one delivering the technical work. I'm the one Robert trusts, and you're the one who let me go for $3,500 a month. It wasn't my decision. Everything was your decision, I said. You chose to pay me nothing. You chose to protect Vivian. You chose to take credit for my work, and now you get to live with the consequences. I hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something else, something quieter. Vindication, maybe. But mostly I felt ready. I went back to my laptop and started typing. The next chapter of my life was about to begin. The contract was signed within 48 hours. Robert Collins moved fast. His legal team reviewed my proposal, made a few minor adjustments, and sent it back with electronic signatures before the weekend. $250,000 plus a bonus structure that could push it past $300 if the project hit its milestones. I stared at the document on my screen, my name at the bottom next to his. This was real. This was happening. But the project couldn't start until Monday. That gave me 3 days. 3 days to prepare, to plan, and to watch my former employer implode. Audrey called me Saturday morning. Her voice was tight with barely contained excitement. Nicholas, you need to see this. The board called an emergency meeting yesterday. George is in trouble, big trouble. They've been going through the financials, and they found everything. The pay discrepancies, the unauthorized bonuses to Vivian, the falsified performance reviews. He's been lying to them for years. How do you know all this? Vivian's been crying to anyone who'll listen. She's terrified she's going to lose her job. She's been telling people that George promised her protection, that he said the board would never find out. But they found out. I leaned back in my chair. What's happening to her? She's been put on administrative leave. They're investigating her too. Apparently her uncle on the board. Yeah, he resigned yesterday quietly. The company is saying it's for personal reasons, but everyone knows the real reason. I felt a strange sense of calm. IT wasn't satisfaction. Exactly, IT was more like the quiet after a storm. The wind had stopped howling. The rain had stopped falling. And now I was standing in the aftermath, looking at what was left. Audrey, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Keep your head down, don't make waves. If they ask you about me, tell them the truth, that I resigned, that you don't know anything about my current plans. I don't want you getting caught in the crossfire. I can handle myself, she said. I know you can, but I also know how these things work. They'll be looking for someone to blame. Don't give them a reason. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you're right. I'll be careful. Good. And Audrey. Yeah. Thank you. For everything. I hung up. I sat there in the silence of my apartment, thinking about what came next. Sunday morning, my phone rang. The caller ID said George Mitchell. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Nicholas, please. Don't hang up. I didn't say anything. I know you have no reason to help me, he said. His voice was different, smaller. The arrogance was gone. But I'm begging you. The board is going to fire me if they're going to make an example of me. I'll never work in this industry again. That's not my problem, George. I know it's not. But I'm calling because I want to apologize. Not because I think it'll change anything. Because I need to say it. I need you to hear it. I waited. I treated you like garbage, he said. I took your work and I put my name on it by let Vivian walk all over you. I paid you nothing while I lined my pockets and protected people who didn't deserve it. I was weak. I was afraid that if I gave you credit, you'd outshine me. And you would have. You were always better than me. The words hung in the air and I didn't know if he meant them. I didn't know if he was just trying to save his own skin. But something in his voice, the crack, the desperation, made me think he was telling the truth, at least part of it. George, I'm not going to save you. I'm not going to talk to the board on your behalf. Whatever happens to you, you brought it on yourself. I know, he said. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. That's all. He hung up. I sat there holding the phone. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. Monday morning, the first day of the rest of my life. I walked into Green Core Energy's headquarters at 8 a.m. The building was sleek, modern, the kind of place where everything smelled new and expensive. A receptionist led me to a conference room where Robert Collins was waiting with his technical team. Nicholas, he shook my hand firmly. Welcome aboard. I've assembled the team that'll be working with you. They're all excited to meet you. The team was young, sharp, eager. They asked good questions. They understood the scope of the project. For the first time in years, I was surrounded by people who actually knew what they were doing. We spent the morning going over the technical requirements. By lunch, I had a clear roadmap. By the end of the day, I'd already sketched out the core architecture. I have to say, Robert said as we wrapped up, I'm impressed. I was worried you'd need time to ramp up, but you're already ahead of schedule. I've been thinking about this project for weeks, I said. Even before I resigned, I knew what needed to be done. I just needed permission to do it. You've got it. Full permission. Full support. If you need anything, just ask. I walked out of the building that evening feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. 2 weeks later, the news came through. George Mitchell had been fired, officially terminated for cause. The board had released a statement. Vague, corporate speak, but everyone knew what had happened. He'd been caught. He'd been exposed. And now he was gone. Vivian Hayes was gone too. Her uncle's resignation had been the first domino. The investigation had revealed the full extent of her incompetence. The code she'd broken, the project she delayed, the money she'd cost the company. She'd been let go without severance. Audrey called me to tell me the details. The whole department is in chaos, she said. Everyone's terrified. They're trying to figure out who's next. What about you? I'm fine. They're actually promoting me. I'm taking over some of your old responsibilities. I told them I couldn't do everything you did, but I could do enough. I'm proud of you, Audrey. Thanks, Nicholas. I owe it all to you. You don't owe me anything, I said. You earned it. The Green Core project was going well. Better than well. We were ahead of every milestone. Robert Collins was delighted. The bonus structure was looking very real. But something was nagging at me. Something George had said during our last conversation. I treated you like garbage. He'd admitted it. He'd apologized. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. I started digging. I had access to a lot of files now. Not from my old company. I'd left those behind. But I had contacts. I had Audrey. I had a network. What I found made me sick. George hadn't just been incompetent. He hadn't just been protecting Vivian. He'd been actively sabotaging my career. For years, he'd been sending negative performance reviews to HR without my knowledge. He'd been blocking my promotions. He'd been telling other department heads that I was difficult to work with. Not a team player. Doesn't take direction well. And there was more. Vivian's uncle on the board, the one who'd resigned, he'd been getting kickbacks. George had been funneling money through a shell company. Vivian had been the middleman. I called Audrey. Audrey, I need you to find something. The emails. The ones you copied. Do they mention any offshore accounts? Any payments to Vivian's uncle? There was a pause. How did you know about that? I guessed. Send me everything you have. She sent me the files. I spent the next 3 hours going through them. It was all there. The payments, the cover-ups, the systematic destruction of anyone who threatened George's position. I was angry, not the hot, impulsive anger I'd felt when I saw my paycheck. This was cold. This was the anger of knowing that someone had stolen years of my life, and I was only now finding out how deep the theft went. I called Robert Collins. Robert, I need to tell you something. About my former employer. About George Mitchell. He listened. I told him everything. The pay discrepancies. The fraud. The kickbacks. The sabotage. I knew some of this, he said when I was done. I'd heard rumors, but I didn't know the full scope. There's more, I said. I have evidence. Emails. Financial records. I can send them to you. Send them. I'll have my legal team look into it. I'm not trying to destroy him, I said. I just want to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. Robert was quiet for a moment. Nicholas, you're not doing this out of revenge. You're doing it out of principle. There's a difference. I'm not sure there is, I said, but I know I can't let it slide. Send the files. I'll take it from there. 3 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Nicholas Hayes? Yes. This is Special Agent Daniel Reed, FBI, White Collar Crime Division, and I'm calling about the case involving George Mitchell and Vivian Hayes. We've been investigating them for some time, but we've been having trouble getting evidence. Your files were exactly what we needed. I felt the world tilt slightly. The FBI? Yes. I can't go into details over the phone, but I wanted to let you know that your assistance has been invaluable. We're going to be filing charges soon. What kind of charges? Wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. This is a big case, Mr. Hayes. We've been building it for months. Your files gave us the missing pieces. I hung up. I sat there for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The $3,500 paycheck, the $28,000 paycheck, George's smug face, Vivian's designer dresses. The late nights, the coffee, the exhaustion. They'd been building a case against him for months, and I'd handed them the final piece. The next few weeks were a blur. The FBI moved quickly. George Mitchell and Vivian Hayes were arrested. The news hit the local papers. The tech community was stunned. People who'd worked with George for years were coming out of the woodwork, telling stories, sharing their own experiences of being mistreated. Audrey called me the day after the arrest. Nicholas, I can't believe it. George and Vivian. In handcuffs. I saw the news this morning. They'll probably go to prison, I said. Wire fraud is a federal crime. It's serious. Does that make you feel better? I thought about it. No, it just makes me feel like justice got done. That's all. You're a better person than me, she said. I'd be celebrating. I'm not celebrating, I said. I'm just relieved. It's over. But it wasn't over. Not quite. A week later, I got a letter, handwritten, from Vivian Hayes. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, it began. But I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. Not because I got caught. Because I was stupid. I was so stupid. She wrote about how she'd been manipulated by George, how he'd promised her success, wealth, a future, how he'd used her uncle's position to keep her safe, how she'd ignored all the warning signs because she was afraid of going back to where she came from. I grew up poor, she wrote. I mean really poor. We didn't have anything. When George offered me this job, I thought it was my way out. I thought if I did what he said, I'd be safe. I was wrong. I read the letter twice. I didn't feel sorry for her, but I understood her. Fear makes people do terrible things. I wrote back, short, to the point. Your apology is accepted, but I can't help you. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. The trial was 3 months later. George Mitchell was convicted on all charges. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Vivian Hayes got 5 years, plus restitution. Her uncle was also convicted, but his sentence was lighter. He'd cooperated with prosecutors. I didn't attend the trial. I didn't need to. I'd already seen everything I needed to see. The Green Corps project finished ahead of schedule. Robert Collins was thrilled. He gave me the full bonus and then some. He also offered me a permanent position as head of technology. I turned it down. I'm not a company man, I told him. I work better on my own. I understand, he said, but the offer stands if you ever change your mind. I started my own consultancy, small at first. Just me and Audrey, who left the old company and joined me. We grew fast. Within a year, we had a team of 10. Within 2 years, we were one of the most respected technical consulting firms in the city. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, I stopped being angry and I stopped thinking about George Mitchell and Vivian Hayes. I stopped replaying that night in my head, the night I saw my paycheck and realized how little I was worth. I'd learned something important, something I couldn't have learned any other way. Your value isn't determined by what other people pay you. It's determined by what you're willing to walk away from. I still think about that night sometimes. The hum of the servers, the empty office, the coffee growing cold on my desk, and that number, 3,500. But I don't think about it the same way anymore. I think about it as the moment everything changed. The moment I stopped being someone else's tool and started being my own person. I think about it as the moment I became free. A year and a half after the trial, I was sitting in a restaurant with Audrey, celebrating the completion of another major project. She was telling me about her new apartment, her new relationship, her new life. What about you? She asked. Are you happy? I thought about it. I thought about the long nights, the stress, the constant pressure. I thought about the money, the success, the respect I'd earned. Yeah, I said. I think I am. Good, she said. You deserve it. I raised my glass. To getting what you deserve, I said. She smiled and clinked her glass against mine. To getting what you deserve. We drank. I looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, George Mitchell was sitting in a prison cell, counting the days until his release. Vivian Hayes was trying to rebuild her life. And I was sitting here in a nice restaurant with a successful business, a good friend, and a future that looked bright. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I'd be ready for it. I always was. And that was the end of it. The end of a story that started with a $3,500 paycheck. The end of the nightmare. The beginning of everything else. I still think about George sometimes, not because I miss him, because he taught me something important. He taught me that people will treat you the way you let them treat you. He taught me that if you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will. He taught me that sometimes the only way to win is to walk away. And I think about Vivian too, not because I forgive her, because she reminds me of something else. She reminds me that fear can make you do terrible things. And that sometimes the people who hurt you the most are just as broken as you are. But I don't dwell on any of it. I can't, because if I did, I'd never move forward. So I move forward. Every day, I build things. I create things. I make a difference in the world. And every time I look at my bank account, I smile. Not because I'm rich, because I'm free. One last thing. A week before the story went public, before I decided to tell it, I got a message. It came through LinkedIn from a profile I didn't recognize. The message was short. Nicholas, I heard about the project, I heard about everything. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry, not because I got caught, because I was wrong about you. You're not a grunt. You never were. You're the real deal. There was no signature, but I knew who it was. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some apologies don't need to be accepted. Some stories don't need to be finished. But this one is. And it ends here. With me, standing on my own 2 feet, looking forward at a life I built myself. Nothing else matters.